Good afternoon. You look beautiful. Why don't you turn to your neighbor and say that? You look beautiful. Do that for me. Just turn to somebody right beside you. You look wonderful. If you are looking for the session, How to Build the Value of Your Self-Storage Portfolio, you have come to the right place. We welcome you. My name is Steve Cooper. I'm with the marketing team at Chamberlain Access Solutions. Chamberlain Access Solutions is the result of the purchase by the Chamberlain Group of two companies, PTI Technologies and Digitech International. See, it's been 2 years and I almost forgot what the names of the companies were. We appreciate this opportunity. We are one of the partner sponsors of the SSA, and it's a pleasure for us to be able to participate. This is a two-part session geared to the mid-sized owners, and I think both these segments are going to be beneficial to all of us. We'll make brief introductions because our speakers have a lot to share. Two of them will be here from now till a little after 3 o'clock, and then we'll have the attorneys come in, and we'll introduce them when they get here. The Nicholson Companies, trading as AAA Self Storage, is a full-service management and development firm incorporated in May of 1962. The firm continues to be involved in developing, building, and purchasing self-storage facilities and providing management consulting services to owners and investors of self-storage facilities. The Nicholson Companies developed the first self-storage facility in the Commonwealth of Virginia in 1973. Tom Nicholson III joined the Nicholson Companies in 1979 after graduating from Roanoke College with a 4-way degree: business, English, biology, and psychology. Tom has been active in construction, development, and management of self-storage facilities since that time. Can we have a queen wave?
I'm sorry?
I just say hello, Tom.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. Stuart Wade has been involved in commercial real estate investments for over 25 years. Since 2004, he's been focused exclusively on the self-storage asset class for storage. He's well-versed in design-build operations, management, financing, valuation, and brokerage. This is going to be a very informative session. So let's get started. Please welcome Tom Nicholson and Stuart Wade.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. The SSA has asked us to talk about maximizing value in a down market, how to improve your cash flow and run your facilities. And we've got about 45 minutes to do it in, so I'm going to be moving right along. If you have questions, there'll be a brief Q&A at the end of this session. So just if you could hang in there and contain yourself to the very end, that would be helpful. Before we can talk about what we need to be doing, let's look at where we've been. And these are some stats that we pulled together for your benefit today from our portfolio of over 50 facilities. And these are a couple of dozen stores that we managed for an 8-year period from 2002 to 09. So no big revelation here. We've all seen what's happened to occupancy in the last couple of years. Some of you may look at these stats, by the way, and pat yourselves on the back. Others of you may think, damn, I wish I were doing that well. So don't know where you're all going to be. But this is what we've been looking at. And as you can see, in 08 and 09, the bottom fell out on the occupancy, but no news there. But what I found interesting when we put these stats together is the softness really started as far back as 2006 and 2007, and at least in our portfolio. And I'm going to, without any particular research, going to attribute that, I think, to overbuilding. I think that was what was at the cutting edge or the forward leading edge of what we're in now, the trouble we're all in now. Now, remember those two stats there, 06 and 07, there where we started the fall off, because look at this now. This is kind of interesting. Same store revenues for that same group of stores. And by the way, these stores are a cross-section of our portfolio. The average size in this group is about 50,000 leasable square feet. They are first and second and third generation, ground level and multi-story facilities. Some have climate control, some don't, etc. And they're running typically about 8 or 10 years old. But in any event, if you look at 06 and 07, we were able to maintain revenues during those 2 years, even though, as you saw on the previous slide, the occupancy had already begun a pretty significant fall off. And the way we did that was through revenue management. And we're going to talk about that some more in just a few minutes. And I hope, by the way, that I always say that if you come away with one nugget of something new that you didn't know when you came in here, it's worth doing. So I hope each of you can come away with at least something from this. In any event, they're the revenues. And then, of course, once we really got into the throes of the recession in 08 and 09, even by managing rates and all, we could no longer we couldn't hold the line on revenues. There was another event that another item began to occur in 08 and 09 also that we had not dealt with before, in addition to occupancy fall off. Anybody want to speculate as to what that might have been? What was the big new thing in self-storage in terms of operations and revenues that began to happen in those, just in the last 2 or 3 years? Now it's prevalent. It's everywhere. I'm sorry? Discounting. Absolutely. We didn't even have a line item on our pro formas that we did for our properties for discounting until about 2.5 years ago. I mean, it's just come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, dollar movement specials, $25 first month free, all that stuff has just come out of the woodwork. And so discounting combined with lowering falling occupancies, resulted in the decline in revenues. Now, what were expenses during that same period? Well, as you can see, they didn't give us a break. They were just sort of steadily inching up during that 8-year period. Even in 09, when everything else was going to hell in a handbasket, the expenses continued to rise. And that was primarily due to 3 or 4 areas, which we'll hit on in just a minute when we drill down just a little bit further. Same store NOI, well, no big surprise here either, of course. When you've got rising expenses and falling revenues, you can't control your NOI. But look how steady the NOI was for all those, for most of those years. I thought that was kind of interesting too. And again, finally in 08 and then really in 09, the NOIs for those properties started to fall. By the way, anybody having a little bit of an upturn for 2010 so far? How many are seeing any upward movement? A few. Looks like maybe a third or 25% of you. We're starting to see a little bit of movement this summer. It's perked up a bit. Don't know if it'll last, but it's at least something to be happy about. And finally, the other stat I wanted to share with you is again, for those of you, your operators that have been in this a while, most of you, no big surprise here. The old rule of thumb of expenses being about a third of revenues was true for us as well, and long before 2002, and right on up sailing through into the first part of this century, we were holding on at about 33%. And as you all know, there are a number of things that impact this particular statistic. One of the biggies is size of a facility. The bigger facilities have a lower percent of expenses, and of course occupancy. If your occupancy falls off, you're going to spike, and that's exactly what happened in 08 and 09. It's not that the expenses shot way up. You saw the graph a minute ago. They eased on up. But when you have that combined with falling occupancy, your expenses as a percentage of income go out of sight. Okay. Now, one of the questions I want each of you to ask and answer today, and I hope you'll leave with this, is perhaps something new or something at least to consider, and that is expense control an effective way of maximizing the performance and wealth of your facilities, the value, etc., the cash flow? Is that really an effective way of operating your facilities, expense control? And I'll say this at the outset. Our experience with takeovers of smaller operators is that y'all are typically pretty good at this. You're pretty good at controlling expenses, many of you. But let's just see if that's worth doing. Okay, what we've done here is try to isolate what we're going to call your fixed expenses, or expenses that you really have only a minimal amount of control over. Insurance. As you can see, over the period, insurance did go up. It didn't go up dramatically, though, over 8 years. It went up 38%. It's a pretty good portion of your overall expense load. It represents 5.41% of all your expenses. Okay? And that, as you can see also, insurance took a jump in 09, at least in our portfolio. Okay, so right when everything else was going to hell, the insurance, for some reason, spiked up again. Postage, again, now this is how we track our costs. Your line items may be different from ours. We track postage as a separate item. And we've actually, through technology like faxing and email and whatnot over the years, we've stabilized it, and it really is pretty much about the same year in, year out. Credit card fees. Anybody not taking credit cards in here? Okay, isn't that wild? I mean, how many years ago was it a cash business? 15, maybe 10? It was all cash not too many years ago. And now look at that, 148% increase in 8 years in that line item. The good news is it still only represents 2.7% of our total expenses, so that's good. Outside services is a category where we collect things like burglar alarm monitoring and whatnot, and that really has remained pretty steady. Professional fees. If you send your bookkeeping information at the end of the year to your accountant, he's an outside accountant, that's what goes into that category. And again, if anything, we've managed to keep that under control. Merchandise for resale, of course, that's the cost of the goods that you're selling behind the counter. This is the cost, and of course, there's the corresponding income side. So if you're marking it up, like anybody with any sense would be, then this is a good thing. You want to see that number increasing, not decreasing. Off-site management fees, that's third-party management, that's us. And of course, we live or die, just like you guys do, by revenues. And as you can see, on the average facility there in 2009, our revenues were down as well, since we're charged a percentage of everything the facility brings in. Real estate taxes. That's one of the bigger offenders, and particularly look what happened in 2009. And as compared to 2008 and 2007 particularly. And what was really going on in 2009 with values? They were in the tank, and yet real estate assessments continue to go up. Lagging indicator, obviously, but I would suggest this to you. If you're not contesting them, next year is going to be the year. A lot of municipalities work on 2 years in arrears. They do in my neck of the woods in Virginia. And so they're telling us next year is going to be the year that we're going to get some relief on that. So don't let them up for air. Go back to them again next year and try to get those assessments reduced. But in any event, that's one of the single biggest of your fixed expenses. There's, other than contest them, there's not a lot you can do. Technology expense. How many of you guys are taking rents and payments and renting units online? Looks like maybe not quite half. Well, those of you that aren't doing it will be doing it soon, I can assure you. Over the next few years, you're going to either do it or you're going to fall by the wayside. The downside to it, of course, is look at technology. It was negligible in 2002, and now it's grown 784% in the last 8 years. That is almost entirely the use of web-based software. Those of you who are taking rents and payments online and leasing online, you have to have a web-based software application to do it. And then, of course, to run the application, you have to have internet access, which is another $70 or $80 a month in most markets. So those two items alone account for most of that line item. Thank goodness it's still only about less than 2% of your total expense load. Utilities, you're at 6.68. It went up again also in 2009. So there are three of the big items that continue to grow even in a down market. And finally, trash removal has really not been. Some people I think there's a feeling out there that that's been a huge bugaboo. It really hasn't been a big one for us. It's been pretty stable for us. Now, before we leave this slide, though, I want you to look at the subtotal. 51% of your expenses at your facility are, by definition, at least my definition, are fixed or pretty fixed. Very hard to influence the outcome on these. 51%. So remember, what's the question? Is controlling expenses really a viable way of running your facility to maximize it? All right, let's go on over to controllable expenses. Well, there's the biggie, of course. Wages, on-site wages. This is what you pay your management team on-site. And we could debate that. That's for another day as to whether or not we should pay our people well or not pay them well or whatever. But I will tell you this, that the transition that you see there from $31,000 up to $57,000, that's not much of a rise much due to a rise in salaries. That is more due to a transition that many of us have made from 2002, caretaker, resident couple, 2007, 8, 9, non-resident, salesperson. Okay? Caretaker couple, resident, non-resident salesperson. Huge difference in the type of people you have running your facilities. Many of us have made the transition. We made it a number of years ago, and we think it's worth doing. You do have to spend a lot more to get a salesperson who doesn't live in the facility, but we feel like it's critical nowadays to have a person like that behind the counter. It's just gotten too competitive. Marketing. Yes, you can control those expenses, and I think you should. We certainly do. As you can see, the rise over 8 years has been relatively modest. The only other thing I would say about that today would be don't do marketing if you can't measure it. Does everybody know what an RCF is? A remote call forwarding telephone number? It's a number that you can embed in virtually almost any type of campaign marketing campaign that you use, and it will track the phone calls that the campaign generates. Similar to an RFI. An RFI is an electronic request for information that you can also embed in any campaign that's on the internet. And if you can't use something like those tools to track the campaign and the results give you hard results on what it's doing, I wouldn't spend the money on it. Okay? So that is within your control. You can control marketing. Office expenses, yeah, you can nip away at those. You know, get a little less toner, get a copier that doesn't require as much toner, that sort of thing. Travel. We recently went to a company called Simply Certified, which eliminates the need to go to the post office to mail you certified letters. And so we've saved a little bit on travel expense. And so you can, but look, it's 0.52% of the total. These are small potatoes, okay, in the big picture. Repairs and maintenance, 6.69% of the total. You can pay them now, you can pay them later. You all know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know on that. You've got to do the maintenance. You can just put it off, but sooner or later it's going to come out to bite you. And finally, the miscellaneous category, which we just dumped some other things in there, which is non-essential for today's purposes. This is a cross-section of a number of facilities that average about 50,000 leasable square feet, okay, from our portfolio. Okay, now, again, before we leave this slide, you add up all the controllable expenses, and they represent 48% of the total expense load. Okay? What did we say earlier that an expense is as a percentage of revenue? It's probably right now running on average 35%, 36%, something like that. So if the controllable part of that is 48%, then that means these expenses represent about 17% of your revenue. Okay? Not much. That's not many dollars to work with if that's how that's where the focus is going to be on running your facility. Sorry about that. I got a little behind on my sheet here. Okay, so what can you do? Well, what we've done, and this is a function of our, economies of scale, our clout, because we have a large number of facilities. And by definition, you guys are a group that are getting into that mode now. You have 3, 4, 5, 10 facilities, or perhaps even more. You should start feeling some clout when you go to cut deals with vendors. So what we've been doing in the last few years is we cut master service agreements with as many vendors as possible. Here are some of the areas that we did it in. And you can save some money doing this. Here are some of the savings that we obtain for our accounts. If you have elevators, get rid of Otis, get rid of those snakes, those people that get out there and they try to, give you the old line that, if you've got to have the remote access and all that. We did that for years. I think it's a rip-off. But anyway, we went with a local service technician vendor, and we saved a bundle of money doing it. This is with only 13 sites that have elevators. We're saving about $45,000 a year for the whole bit works. That's about $3,400 a year per site on elevator maintenance that we save by cutting a master agreement with a small vendor. PPI, that's our credit card processing. Okay, what we talked about earlier, those credit card fees, there it is. And you guys should be approaching the size now where you can go back to your credit card vendor and get what they call a wholesale rate. We did it, I guess it's been about a year or two ago, and saving $33,000 a year or $600 and some dollars per site per year. Orkin Pest, that's who we went with recently. Pick your vendor, but consolidate, go with one, and you can save a little bit of money there. Anybody ever heard of Granite? This is a new one that we're trying. There's one guy. We're just now signed up with them, but the analysis that they have done with us of our account is it's going to save a bundle. They're a telecommunications bundler. They don't provide anything. They just simply take your service. They're huge. I think they do public storage. I believe that's what they marketed to us. And they remarket it out to the local telecom companies and get you a substantial discount and still make money doing it. Anyway, as you can see, it's going to run $600 or so per site per year. Trash disposal, we already mentioned. That's a biggie, though. Got to keep an eye on that. And by the way, we don't ever do anything for more than a year. These multi-year agreements that look great up front. Oh, yeah, great, we'll give a low rate. All these things, there's certainly many of them. Telecom, trash, credit cards, they're all changing just so rapidly. I would never do an agreement for more than a year, even if it required a little bit higher rate now, because you're going to renegotiate that thing every year. Merchandise for resale, we just changed the vendor that provides us with all of our boxes, etc., and we got a much better rate because we're buying in bulk now. If you have multiple sites, buy for all the sites at one time. Software, if you've got a web-based software, you're paying those vendors plenty of money, and if you've got 10 or 15 sites or more with them, negotiate a good rate on them, and most of them will do that. If you're not already doing consolidated auction ads, you can save a pretty good amount of money by doing that. That's where if you have multiple sites, of course, you're running one ad for all the locations. We just took bought a BlackBerry server. I don't know how many of y'all carry BlackBerries. All of our district managers do. And so we actually bought a server now, and so we can manage the BlackBerry account in-house. It saves a few pennies. It's not a big saver. And finally, uniforms and travel, taking advantage of technology. We're reducing the number of meetings we're having. We're creating an online learning center. All of you guys can do that. It's we call it our intranet portal. And we have all manner of robust things on it that it's an employees only login. But you can pay a vendor. It's not that costly, and set it up so that all your employees can all access it. You don't have to have so many meetings everywhere. Okay. Well, before I leave this, I just wanted to say this. Now look, with all that, bringing all that muscle on all those accounts and cutting deals with those vendors and all, if you've got elevators, we saved you, and you're an account of ours, we saved you maybe $10,000. Okay, if you don't have elevators, all that effort, maybe we saved you $6,500 a year. Okay, that's not where the money is, guys, in self-storage. Where's the money in self-storage? It's in sales and rates, in revenue management. Not on the expense side, it's on the revenue management side. That's where the money is. You don't want to be the low price leader if you can help it. I understand everybody doesn't have a beautiful 4-story flagship, but everything should be directed towards maximizing your revenues. And I'll show you how that works. Now, one way of maximizing is through what I call revenue enhancement. And if you're not doing merchandise sales, you're in a cave someplace. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But you all know what it is. If you've got a small showroom, it does pay most of the time to enlarge it if you've got a sufficient traffic count, etc. But you should be doing this. Most of our sites don't make a killing on it, but it brings in anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 gross a month. And if it's a double, we're making maybe $1,000 or $1,500 a month. We've got some sites where we were able to negotiate a packing and shipping arrangement with a couple of the UPS type vendors, and they will do that in certain circumstances if your site is well located enough. And it's not a big profit center, maybe $500 a month or so net. Rug Doctor, that's one we just started trying the other day. Again, it's really more of an idea to get a little bit of money in the door, but to be an end-all to the user. We want everybody to be everything to everybody. Very easy to set up. And we call this the atomic bomb. How many of you all have rental truck operations on your sites? Yeah, okay, it looks again like maybe 20 or 25% of you. Well, those of you that have them already know this. Those of you that are thinking about it, they do generate revenue, particularly if you're in a good location. You can pick up a couple of grand a month perhaps on it, net to you guys. But look at the site. If you've got a nice looking site, most of the time they end up looking like this, and it also is a tremendous distraction for the manager away from their core duty of renting units. So you have to think real hard before you go with the atomic bomb. Okay, and finally, the other revenue enhancement technique that I would suggest to you, how many of you are selling customer goods insurance at the counter? I would think most of you. How many are you not doing that? There's a few. Okay, well, if you're not doing it, you ought to be doing it. For one thing, I think it's good for you. It's good for your customer. It provides a layer of protection for everybody. But also, you can make a little bit of money on it. Most of the vendors of this stuff will throw a commission back to the owner of the facility. And it's not a huge commission, and it depends on how many facilities you have. But if you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 facilities, you should be able to negotiate a decent rate of commission rate on that stuff from the vendor, and it goes right into your pocket. And then the challenge becomes selling the stuff. We decided the first of the year to really push it. We spent a lot of time training our people, push this stuff, and we've gone from a 15% penetration of our customer base to almost 30% in 6 months. We anticipate by year end we're going to be pushing at 40% penetration. And again, now you're talking about when you get up that high, maybe it's $300, maybe a little bit north of that for the owners, but hey, it's found money. It comes from the vendor. And it's easy to sell, it's not a big distraction. So give some thought to that one. Nevertheless, all these revenue enhancement techniques, we still haven't gotten to the big money. These are probably as lucrative as the cost savings that we talked about a little while ago. They're both kind of, not big deals, but they're all useful. Here's where the big money is. The big money, like I said earlier, is in revenue management, specifically rate management. And there are a number of ways that you can do this. And remember I said earlier that our experience with smaller operators is that y'all are good at controlling expenses. Y'all are typically lousy at your rate management. Typically lousy. I'm not saying that for everybody. If you're good at it, just ignore what I just said. But most of the time when we take over facilities that are run by smaller operators, they have been lousy at doing this for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're intimidated. They don't want to, it piss their friends off that they have put in the facility or whatever it is, but they just don't do it. This is one way to do it. This is SiteLink, the software we use. It has an alarm-based system where you can plug it in there and it will alarm you when a customer's anniversary date comes up, and you can set the anniversary date for 6 months, 12 months, 3 months, whatever you want. But it semi-automates the feature. If you're leaving it up to your manager, that may never happen. Okay, so at least it automates it and brings it to the manager's attention. Are we going to raise this person's rent on the anniversary date? The method that we focus on, well, one of the methods that we focus on the most, though, is what we call our contract and standard rate review. This is a comprehensive look at your contract rates, as what you have in your folder. Everybody that's already renting from you, you need to go back at regular intervals, fixed intervals, according to a protocol, and you got to look at them and say, okay, is it time to raise them or not? And you got to look at your standard rates and say, is it time to raise that or not? Now, we think you should do it twice a year. Some people say quarterly. I think that's a little heavy. You can upset some customers. Some people don't do it but every year or two. Anyway, we do it every year, twice a year, and we think that's a pretty good amount of times to do it. It starts with, as you can see there, that's everybody's, I bet you every one of you's got a form similar to this. It's just a competitor rate analysis. You look at what your competitor is doing. One of the errors, though, is that's where a lot of people stop. You don't stop when you get your rate comps and you look at them and go, oh, well, we're as high as everybody else. I guess we can't go up. That's just the beginning. The next step is you look internally and you look at your own inventory. And if you have SiteLink or a comparable program, you can look at a report like this that gives you your rented percentage by space. Okay? One of the most common mistakes is by operators is that they look at your overall occupancy and they say, 76%, I can't raise rates. I can almost always find some size in anybody's facility that can be raised, unless they're really, really on the ropes. So you peel back the onion, as they say, look at the individual spaces, and you can look at this report here, and it tells you what the occupancy is in that space, and hence what the demand is. Now, this particular report is a snapshot, a moment in time. Okay? The even better report is this, the occupied history. This gives you the history of each size in your facility, and you can take it back as far as you want, and it will give you a good idea of what the demand has been for that particular unit size over a period of time, 12 months, what have you. But you should look at these two reports, and they will help you determine, is it time for a rate increase in any of the sizes at your facility. Okay. The third way of managing your rates is daily rent push. Okay, that's been around for a few years now. SiteLink has a wonderful module that will do it practically, automate it for you. There are several competitors of SiteLinks, I think, that do the same thing. This is a screenshot of the SiteLink module. You can see the normal rate is just to the left of the rates in blue. Those are the standard rates. And the way it works is, let's just say that you've got 5 10 by 20s in your inventory. And you've told the software that when you get below 5 in inventory, that the push rate kicks in. The push rate can be whatever you want. It can be a kicker of 5, 10, 15, even 20% in the rate. So you rent one of those 5 units and now you're down below 5. The next guy that walks in the door, the blue rate comes up and it's the push rate. All the manager does is they look down at it, they see the screen. It's just that simple. They just follow what's on the screen. They don't have to be manipulating the rates themselves if you have good software. Very important, and there is a ton of money to be made in pushing rates like this on a daily basis. This should be looked at literally every day. Okay, a couple of other methods. Collecting late fees. Our facilities, we have many facilities, and even now, more than ever, with the occupancy issues that we've got and everybody's struggling to make their rent and all that, late fees are coming in. We have facilities that bring in 2, 3, 4, even 5% of their revenues each year are late fees. This can be a very big number. The fees on here are monthly. These are monthly fees. And by the way, while I'm thinking of it, you'll see a couple more slides similar to this. If you've got multiple facilities and you're not producing a report like this where you can compare one facility to the other side by side, you should be doing that. You're behind the curve. You need to produce these numbers just like you see them here, where you can just, because you can see in a minute if you've got a manager out of the 10 facilities that you're operating, if you've got a manager that is waiving too many late fees. Our goal at our company is to collect 90%, or well, let's say not waive more than 10% of the late fees. Okay, if you've got a manager who's waiving 20 or 30% of their late fees, there could be any number of things, but there's something up, okay, with that situation. A lot of money on these late fees. Look at the dollars involved. Big dollars. Collecting the rent. Getting it in here. Our focus is on 30-day and older money. Why is it on the 30-day and older? Anybody wants versus the first day? It goes, I'll give you a hint, it goes back to the last slide. Yeah, because we like those late fees. Most people that go late initially ultimately pay. But once they go past 30 days, the likelihood that they're ever going to pay starts to go like this pretty quickly. So we focus on the 30-day and older, and our company goal is to hold it at about 3% on every facility. Now, again, you look at this report, and you can see the BA, the facility, the initials of BA, it looks like 4th or 5th on the bottom. He's got 16%. When we're sitting around our meetings, that sticks out like a sore thumb. It's a red flag, and we say, let's find out what's going on over at that site. Why isn't that manager collecting the money? That's what's so important about those consolidated or comparative reports. These are reports you produce in-house, and they don't come off the software. Okay. This may be one of the biggest of all. Remember we talked about it earlier? The discounting. Look at the dollars involved. These are monthly totals, and you've got them. Now, that facility, Dam Neck, that's 140,000 leasable square feet. Okay, so that's a big facility, but even so, $10,000 a month is what that guy is losing or leaving on the table in discounts. Okay, that is a lot of money. Look at all those numbers. This is every single month. The average for the whole portfolio is $2,800 a month in discounting. This, by the way, is one way of measuring discounting. There are two ways, right? There's a discount that you give at the counter, and it's an upfront discount that they get the first month, and then immediately the rates revert back to their original rates, right? And then there's the other type that stays with you like herpes. It just stays in there and doesn't ever go away. Okay? They're two completely different types of discounts, and you should be tracking them independently of each other. Your software, if it's good, will do this for you, but you need to be looking at it because they're different and they need to be handled differently. This is the other report, what we call rental rate variance. This is another type of discounting that we track. But again, the dollars on these things are absolutely huge. Stop worrying about the paper clips. Stop worrying about counting the paper clips and start worrying about this kind of stuff. Okay, I'm coming down to the end here, but I had one last point I wanted to make. And again, this is a meeting that's supposed to be for owners, Probably, in most cases, owners of multiple facilities. Has your store manager been with you since you opened? How many can attest to that? How many of you? Anybody? A couple. Do you know, trust, and rely on them? How many, even if they haven't been with you since the beginning? Most of you, I would like to think, trust your managers and rely on them. Do you allow your manager to have the password to the computer software? Anybody going to honestly answer that? I won't even ask you, embarrass you. No, no, and no. Okay, you guys, as owners, you cannot rely on your managers to do this stuff. It is too important. Your manager is just not equipped to do it, and particularly if they are bonused on occupancy. How many bonus your managers primarily on occupancy? Okay, no hands going up. I hope that's true. You should be bonusing them on income, okay? Because if you're not, bad stuff happens. I asked how many of y'all are bonusing your managers based on occupancy. And I'm saying that's a no-no. I'm not going to say you can't do it, but I'm saying that your big bonus, unless it's a fill-up facility, but the big bonus on a stabilized facility should be tied to income, not occupancy. Just real quickly, if you've got a manager who's bonus on occupancy, what happens when you walk through the door one day and say, we're going to have a rate increase? Or if you ask the manager, go out and gather up some competitor rates, I'm thinking about having a rate increase, and they're bonus on occupancy. They're completely at odds with the reality. They just see their occupancy going down, there goes their bonus, and to boot, they're going to get a bunch of angry phone calls. If they're bonused on income, what's their reaction when you come in and tell them you want to raise rates? Bring it on. That's what they want. So give some thought to that. But getting back to my final point, which is you guys cannot rely on your managers to do these things. You either need to hire somebody like us, or you need to do it yourselves. You need to get out there. You need to get behind the counter. You need to run your stores by the numbers, generate these sorts of reports. You've got to make the marketing decisions. You can't rely on them to do it. You can't let your managers go around and gather your rates and come in and recommend what your rates are going to be. You can't let them decide when to discount and when not to. You've got to monitor that and control it. The monies are too huge. And there's the discounting again. Okay. That concludes my portion. Sir?
Well, thanks for bringing all the good news of what's happened in our markets, and hopefully a better day is coming. But the topic is also how to increase the value of your existing facility. So I'd like to share with you all some things that we've employed with facilities that we think have increased the value and effectiveness of the facilities. This is a 1980s era ground level facility in Chesterfield County, Virginia. And it's typical of combination of roll-up doors, CMU block construction, and you can see it's got a little bit of age on it. What's happened in this market is about 2 miles away, a new competitor had come in with a brand new market with climate control and so forth and so on. So we went to the owner and said, we think it's time, Mr. Owner, for you to invest some money in this. And forgive me for saying this, because I don't mean to insult. Tommy, where's that? No. That thing in your hand.
Sorry.
I don't mean to insult anybody, but you'll hear me say this a couple of times in the presentation. We suggested you put a little lipstick on the pig. So we took this facility and did this. So you can see what the store looked like before. This is in progress, and this is the after. We put elastomeric, which is a rubberized paint, on the buildings. We reconditioned the doors, both the swing doors and the roll-up doors, put new gutters and downspouts on it, and as you can see, we put a lot of lipstick on this pig. It's about 40,000 gross square foot of building, and we invested or encouraged the owner to invest about $45,000 to dress it up. So I think, again, taking a look at the before and seeing the after, let me see where we go. Here's a store in the city of Norfolk. As you can tell, it's got weathered paint, a painted-on sign. The actual entranceway to the sales office is off camera. It's the old entranceway was here. And you can see here's a limestone entranceway that's not used. This street right here is Granby Street, City of Norfolk, and it carries about 30,000 cars per day. And one of our friendly competitors opened a store right on the opposing corner. There's the after. Now, you can see right there, that was some storage units, and as I said earlier, the old office, the before office, if you will, sales office was there, and it's now right there. And I'll show you some before and after snapshots of the office, too, because as Tom mentioned, we find that we can aid the bottom line by having a visible showroom where you can display box locks, bubble wrap, and so forth. But you can see here also we've made the sales office there, painted the building. That's now the new office entrance. And we've got lit signage. That's the before office. Is it no wonder we only sold, a couple of $100 worth of locks and things? You could not fit 3 people in that office. If 3 people came in to pay their bill, the fourth was going to have to wait outside in the rain or whatever. And you can see that's the sum total of the POS displays. That's the after. And there's the bill, the mini price self storage right across the street. You can see it out the window. So there's the before, there's the after. How many of you all own a store like this? It's another 1980s era store, no climate control, just ground level facility, anchor fence surrounding it for security. I mean, how many by show of hands own a store like that? Okay. How many of you have this store that opens within 1.2 miles of it? Now you can see that it's a store we're managing for this particular operator as we are managing that one. So the reality is that this store, which we opened in the summer of 2007, we're gaining about $13 average annual rent rate per square foot. This store is only getting about $9. So the owner must face reality is that if you've got this type of competition in your market, what do? You're not going to be able to get the rates that this chap is going to get. So you can see we've got fresh paint on the curves, nice landscaping, keep the trees. There's no clutter or litter in the drive aisle. So we just continue to manage this store to the best of our ability. You just can't tear the store, go to the investor and say, the owner and say, okay, we've got this new guy up the street, Class A institutional grade facility. Let's go ahead and put a stick of dynamite in here, evict the tenants, put a stick of dynamite in here and rebuild. It's just not economically viable. So what you must do is say, okay, what are we going to do to maintain our market share? And if the guy up the street is getting $13 a square foot, you may have to get $10.50. Anyway, that pretty much concludes our presentation. I'd like to throw it out. And by the way, I've got Tommy described our approach to rate management with great detail. I've also got a handout that I'll pass out to you all if you want that has it in paper. But in the meantime, if there's any questions you'd like to ask myself or Tommy, we'll throw that up now.
Thanks, Dave. How do you guys feel about posting your rates on the website?
You want to take that?
And also, how do you people calling you and asking what your rates are?
The question is, how do we feel about posting rates publicly, like on the internet and where else?
And then also, what's your feeling as far as sharing rates between competitors?
Go ahead, Stuart. You answer the first part, I'll answer the second.
Okay. We don't like to post the strictest rates on the internet, but occasionally we will. But usually we'll say something a little creative, like we have some super economy units and things like that. So we'll say 10 by 10 climate controls, 95 and up. Now the guy appears at the counter and says, "Hey, I want to do the $95 special," and say, "Oh, that's one of our super economy units. Let me show it to you." Roll the door up and show the guy that there's a pole in the middle of a vertical pole in the middle of it. And he, is recalcitrant to do that. But at least that way we've got something on the internet that says it. 5 by 5s from $25 a month. We don't necessarily have to write the thing. The object in internet advertising or in any kind of advertising or to trigger an inquiry or to trigger that person to come into the office. So if we can get them in the office, we can usually sell them.
And the second part of your question is we do give our rates out. If somebody wants them over the telephone, including our competitors. We are not one of those that's real tight-fisted about basic information like that. In fact, I'll suggest this to all of y'all. This is exactly the way we train our managers. A customer walks in the office and we can't help them. They want a 10 by 20, we don't have any. There's a 4A facility around the corner, they don't have any. So we can't refer them out to a sister 4A facility if there's one in the market. And I ask the managers, what do we do next? The next thing we do is we keep a comp binder on our counter. It's got every competitor in it, photographs, features, rates, etc. We pull it out. Manager will pick the phone up and call Jenny up at the used store up the street and say, "Jenny, I've got a customer. He's looking for a 10 by 20. This is Jonesy down at 4A. Oh, you got one? Okay, I'll send them up. They'll be up in about 10 minutes. How much is it?" And you put it on there. You take a sheet. They're required to have a sheet in there on the directions from their site to each competitor within their primary market area. And they Xerox it on the counter, hand it to the customer with the manager's name, the rate quote, etc., on the piece of paper with the map. And then they say sayonara to the customer. And the reason we take that approach is why? Who is happy? Customer is delirious. Customer thinks that our manager is the greatest thing since canned bread, and where are they going to come next time or tell their friends to go? They're going to go there. Who else is happy? The competitor is happy. They're loving it. And if we lost anything, we haven't lost anything. We couldn't serve them anyway. We did our very best to serve them. So it's a win-win for everybody, and that's exactly the training scenario that I give them every time we do quarterly training. It's kind of a long answer, sorry. But.
Yes, sir.
Your other Facebook facility, how big a facility was that? Main Street, you moved the office. How big a facility, how much did you spend moving the office and Facebook?
The question is, how big is the facility?
In the multi-store renovation, how big was it and how much did we spend? We did that several years ago, and I think the facility is it's pretty good size. I'm going to say it's
70,000 plus or minus leasable square feet.
Leasable, okay, 70,000 leasable, and I'm not 100% sure what we spent on it. I wish I could tell you, but I don't know. But I can tell you this: the point of everything that Stuart says was, you can't take a chicken and make it into a duck, that old expression. Don't try to take a second generation facility and make it a brand new facility. Spend your money wisely. Paint is a great way to do it. I mean, these are old proverbs. I mean, I'm not creating anything new, but use paint. If you want to put a seal coat on your asphalt, it makes it look brand new. Those things are relatively inexpensive. $1 or so a square foot for the paint will usually do it. And you can make a facility that's old to look brand new. And you haven't really invested a lot in capital improvements. Don't try to change the nature of the facility. Accept your position if you're in a facility like that one that we're talking about, the older one. Accept your position that you're not going to be the rate leader in that scenario. And if you do, and your focus becomes not about can I get the rates, but can I retain market share? Market share being occupancy. How can I hold the line on occupancy? And I can tell you, in both those scenarios, it's working. In that multi-story, when we did that makeover on it, there was a brand new multi-story. I mean, I could practically throw a stone and hit it across the street. And we hung in there. We never got below about 86% occupancy. I think right now it's up to about 90.
92.
Yeah. We hung right in there with the guy across the street after doing that cosmetic makeover.
And by the way, that guy across the street, he's a large operator in Eastern Virginia. He trades his mini price. I mean, he's he's just, hey, I'll give it away until it gets filled up.
Okay. Anybody else? And you tell us when we have to cut off, Steve, or wherever you are. There you go. Yes, sir. Didn't he have his hand up right there? Okay, you're back.
A lot of the changes in military prevention facilities located within markets that serve military bases here. Obviously, a lot of them are shutting down and folks are losing occupancy. You guys seeing any other trends or other auxiliary uses for those types of properties, storage related or non-storage related, that can help increase income?
The gentleman wants to know, have we seen any alternative uses for properties that were formerly well located, but a base closed down, or something catastrophic happened, and it's just pretty much hopeless as a self-storage facility? And I can't. That's the nightmare scenario, and I wish I had an answer for that. And we got a couple of those that, for various reasons, they're in very desperate condition. And if you've got a location that's just simply impaired, unfortunately, what we tell our clients is you can't turn chicken shit into chicken salad. You can't. And there may be an alternative use. We haven't come up with it yet.
Yes, sir.
When you talk about revenue, increasing revenue, you talk about truck rentals.
Yes.
I didn't get the gist of your final comment. Is it good or bad?
Well, I just said that you've got to do a thorough investigation of it before you do it, because it has some downsides. It's a good revenue generator and it's a good traffic generator. And when I say good, relative. I mean, you were talking about $1,000 or $2,000 a month. That's not great. It's okay. It's nothing compared to what you can make if you're controlling your discounting. Just control your discounting, you don't have to worry about all those trucks. But the downside to the trucks is they're a tremendous distraction. Ask anybody who's in it, and they'll tell you their managers spend a tremendous amount of time messing with those damn trucks. And they're also a little bit unsightly. U-Haul is the worst. We got a couple that use Penske. Penske is a much cleaner, nicer truck rental operation. I would go with that, but we do have some owners that are with U-Haul, and their trucks are pretty beat up.
One thing that hasn't been brought up is that the macro of this industry has changed quite a bit in the last handful of years. I mean, there were, and perhaps many of you in the room can remember when your storage is filled up. It didn't require a lot of thought or effort, and how things have changed. Some of that may be the economy. Some of that may be overbuilding in your markets, and some of it is probably just a bouillabaisse, a mixture of all of it. But the fact of the matter is we're not in 2002. We're not going to go back there, I don't think. So you have to consider things carefully from an investment standpoint as to, is trucks the way to go? Because in 2002, we didn't have many trucks. If an investor came to me and said, Stu, you think I ought to have a free move-in truck? Heck no. What do you want that for? It's a problem. It's, additional liability. You've got high insurance costs. Sure, you can collect a little revenue and then move out. But now, almost without exception, we open a new store or even have a store that was stabilized that's not stabilized now. The competition now that has made me go to that investor and say, we got to get a truck. Because sometimes that is the reason what differentiates the customer from renting from you compared to renting to the guy up the street. But the old 2002 build it and they will come, those days are gone. I hope they come back. I mean, I see Heath Mulkey in the room here. He hopes they come back. But it's just you're fighting for market share right now.
Let me get this guy back here before. Yes, sir.
Tried kiosks in any of your locations?
Yes, we have. We have one right now. The owner loves it. We had another one about 2 years ago, and the owner ripped it out. So it's I haven't priced them real lately. The one that has one right now is down in North Carolina. I know it exists down there, but I haven't actually talked to the owner about it. I assume that their monthly has come down some, but the big bugaboo before, one of the big bugaboos was the monthly service arrangement or whatever. It was several $100s a month, and the owners that had the previous one just didn't feel like they were getting value there. I will say this too, it requires a lot of education of your customers. If you put one in, I personally think they're a pretty good idea. I think they're here to stay. I think we're going to see more and more of them. But if you decide to get one, you're going to have to get your managers to invest a ton of time initially educating their customers on the benefits of it and how to use it. Or they'll just walk right past it and keep going to the counter. And because you can track, how many transactions a day come through the kiosk. And these owners were tracking it and relating it to how much it was costing them every month to have it. And they said, this is crap. I'm not getting anything off of it. But this guy down in Carolina, who's a very hands-on owner, and he works real closely with our district manager, they've got the manager down there just whipping the thing. And I mean, they have a very significant, I can't tell you the percentage right off the bat, but I know it's a very significant transaction use on it.
The insomniac in the kiosk will never take the place of the beating heart. I know that Jefferson Shreves is here today, and I know he's got a handful of stores in Indianapolis or Indiana or Illinois, I'm uncertain. And he's built a portfolio of almost self-serve stores. God bless him. But, if you're talking about a 35 to 50, 60,000 net rentable square foot facility, there's no way that insomniac or kiosk is going to beat the beating heart of a person behind it. So.
Okay. Yes, sir.
You mentioned something about people that are more than 30 days late. We have some people that have gone over the 30-day period. And then my question relates to collecting from them, pushing towards the auction. At what point do you hang on versus letting go?
Well, can I answer that?
Sure.
I know you're getting ready to jump right in. First of all, the sign of a mismanaged company, in my view, is one who works deals with customers. Is one who works deals with customers. In other words, who takes partial payments. When we take over a facility from an operator and we delve into the accounting, look into the software, and if we find that there's all sorts of deals that have been made, guys have made partial payments against rent and whatnot, that's a sign of a mismanaged facility. Now, that being said, and I'll add to that our company goal has always been to hold it at 3%, which means you've got to schedule auctions every month. Boom, boom, boom. We schedule them, we hold them. Our customers understand it. They know we mean business, and all that's fine. However, I want to add this one thing. We've had to rethink a little bit of that in this down economy because we got significant vacancies at a lot of our facilities, and it costs money to take somebody to auction, doesn't it? It costs a fair amount of money to run that auction ad and go through that process. And so we've now started holding. We don't work deals. Don't misunderstand me. We're still not working deals with people in terms of taking parcels and doing all that. But we will sometimes delay the auction process just a bit until we have enough units to justify that expense going in. We didn't used to do that at all. So we're trying to be a little bit aware again of that expense side of things too. You stop me, Steve, if we've got to stop. But okay, yes, sir.
Where do you see the trend of resident managers as teams? Or are you hiring people without the residents?
We stopped doing that 7 or 8 years ago, and I think
if you have on-site residents, you don't use them at all?
We have a number of facilities that have an on-site residence, but what we do nowadays is sometimes we'll put the assistant manager in there. We'll put sometimes even a roving maintenance guy in there. And there's a lot of nuances, by the way, if you decide to do a roving person as to who's paying for him, who's they're providing. One facility's giving him the apartment, so the other ones you have to do some manipulation of the money and all to make it all fair to everybody. But we frequently will still use the apartments, but just not for our primary manager. We want a really good sales-oriented, retail-oriented manager behind the counter, and you can get them in a resident manager, but it's a lot tougher. You run an ad, I don't know how many of you run your own ads or whatever, but if you run an ad, same general locale, and one of them is resident manager, and the other one is non-resident manager, and one of them, the non-res is a little bit higher salary, and the resident is a little lower salary, but a free apartment, which one do you think you're going to get more responses? 90% of the time I get 3 or 4 or 5 times the number of responses on the non-resident ad. Okay? And then when I look at the resident ad, I hate to say it, but I mean, quite honestly, a lot of people that are applying to those resident ads, not all, but a lot of them, are looking for a nice, cushy little job that they've heard about self-storage. They want to sweep up. Husband wants to sweep up, and the wife comes down in curlers, and the caretaker mode. They're looking for that. That's not what we're looking for. And it's much harder to get somebody to live above a mini storage who's sales-oriented and really a go-getter if you make them live there. It's much tougher to do. Pardon? Okay, one more question. Anybody else? Did I get everybody? Okay, there he is. Last guy. Yes,
You
sir.
have a large facility that's 85,000 square feet, with 70% for 2 years. You discount those rates to fill that place up.
The question is, if we have a large facility that was 85% for 2 years,
70%.
it was at 70% for 2 years?
Been there for 2 years. Big facility, 800 units.
Oh, you mean it was in fill up
Yeah.
and it reached 70%? Okay.
Kind of stopped.
Stalled. Your fill up stalled. Okay.
What's your occupancy on your 10 by 10s?
70%.
What's your occupancy on your 5 by 5s?
I'm going to say 70% on everything.
Okay. The short answer is, in reality, if you take a look at your asset inventory, you're going to find that you've got certain sizes, 10 by 15s or 10 by 10s, that are in shorter supply than others. And that's, just as Tommy mentioned in his portion of the presentation, that's where you're going to take a look at saying, okay, I'm tighten that supply, I'm going to juice the rents. You're going to have perhaps your 10 by 20s. Maybe you said 70% your overall facility's physical occupancy. Let's say your 10 by 20s are at 30%. I'm just throwing a number out. That would be one that I would put on the reader board, specials on 10 by 20s, half off or something along those lines. But please try to stop looking at, when you're looking at your rates, please try to look at your individual unit sizes, your inventory, and rather than saying, oh, I'm only 76% occupied, I can't push your rent rate through, want to bet? Because I bet your contractor bays or something are sold out, and you could push $5, $10 rent rate through, and that's money that drops right to your NOI.
Okay.
And again, thank you very much. If anybody wants a handout on our approach to rent management, I've got them right up here. Just come see me.